The morning Eliza Montgomery discovered every last dollar gone from the tin box beneath the floorboards, she felt the world tilt sideways like a wagon with a broken axle. She stood in the small bedroom of their rented house on the outskirts of Deadwood, Dakota Territory, staring at the empty space where 3 years of her wages from taking in laundry and mending had been carefully hidden. It was September 1876, and the gold rush town still buzzed with prospectors and dreamers, but Eliza's dream had just shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Her hands trembled as she lifted the loose floorboard again, hoping desperately that she had somehow missed seeing the money. The hiding spot remained empty except for a folded piece of paper she had overlooked in her panic. She unfolded it with shaking fingers and recognized her husband's messy scrawl immediately. "Gone to California. Don't bother looking. The money's mine as much as yours, maybe more. You'll manage. You always do." No apology. No explanation beyond greed. No signature even. Just those cold words from Thomas Montgomery, the man she had married 2 years ago in a moment of loneliness and poor judgment. She had known within 3 months that she had made a terrible mistake. Thomas drank too much, worked too little, and had a wandering eye that landed on every saloon girl in town. But she had stayed, telling herself that marriage vows meant something, that perhaps he would change, that she could make it work through sheer determination. Now he had stolen everything she had worked for and disappeared like morning mist. Eliza sank onto the bed, the mattress creaking under her weight. She was 24 years old, alone and penniless in a rough mining town where a woman without protection was vulnerable in ways she did not want to contemplate. The rent was due in a week. She had enough food for perhaps 3 more days if she stretched it. Winter would arrive in another month or 2, and she needed firewood, warmer clothes, and a dozen other necessities that cost money she no longer had. For a long moment, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of despair. Then she stood up, smoothed her worn calico dress, and tied her auburn hair back with a piece of ribbon. She had survived worse. When her parents died of cholera on the trail west 5 years ago, she had survived. When she arrived in Deadwood with nothing but the clothes on her back and $10 sewn into her hem, she had survived. She would survive this too, though Thomas Montgomery would face justice if there was any justice to be found in this wild territory. She walked into town with the note clutched in her hand, her boots kicking up dust on the rutted main street. Deadwood sprawled through a gulch, a hasty collection of wooden buildings, tents, and muddy paths. The sound of hammers and saws filled the air as new construction continued, despite Wild Bill Hickok's murder just weeks before. That killing had reminded everyone how quickly violence could erupt in these parts, how thin the veneer of civilization really was. The sheriff's office sat between a hardware store and a doctor's practice. Eliza pushed open the door and found Sheriff Seth Bullock behind a scarred wooden desk, writing something in a ledger. He looked up, his stern face softening slightly when he saw her. "Mrs. Montgomery, what brings you here?" "My husband stole my savings and ran off," Eliza said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I need help getting it back." Seth Bullock set down his pen and gestured for her to sit in the chair across from him. He was a fair man, as far as lawmen went, but Eliza could already see the resignation in his eyes. "Tell me what happened." She explained everything, showing him the note. The sheriff read it, his jaw tightening. "How much did he take?" $347. Bullock let out a low whistle. "That's a considerable sum. You saved all that from laundry work?" "And mending, and taking in a few boarders now and then." She met his eyes. "I earned every penny honestly, Sheriff. That money was going to buy me a little house, maybe start a proper boarding house business. Now it's gone, and so is he. Do you know which way he headed?" "The note says California." Bullock leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. "Mrs. Montgomery, I'll be straight with you. Thomas left 2 days ago, according to what I've heard. He's got a significant head start. California's a big place, and tracking one man across that much territory isn't something I can do. I've got jurisdiction here in Deadwood and the immediate area, not across multiple territories." Eliza had expected this, but hearing it still felt like a blow. "So, he just gets away with it? He steals everything I have and faces no consequences?" "I'm not saying that. I'm saying I can't pursue him myself. Bullock tapped his fingers on the desk, thinking. But there might be someone who can help you. Have you heard of Gideon Frost? The name meant nothing to her. No, who is he? Mountain man, trapper, tracker. He knows the wilderness between here and California better than any man alive. Spent years in the Rockies before settling in a cabin about 10 miles north of town. He comes down every few weeks for supplies. Bullock's expression turned to praising. He's helped track down a few fugitives before. If anyone can find your husband and get your money back, it's Frost. Hope flickered in Eliza's chest, small but bright. Will he help me? Can you ask him? I can't ask him. He doesn't come to town on any schedule I can predict. But you could go to him. His cabin's up in the hills, near where Whitewood Creek splits off toward Bear Butte. Bullock pulled out a piece of paper and sketched a rough map. Follow the main trail north, then take the western fork when you reach the old lightning-struck pine. His cabin's another mile past that, set back in the trees. You'll know it by the elk antlers over the door. Eliza took the map, studying it. What kind of man is he? Can I trust him? Bullock considered the question carefully. Gideon Frost is hard, Mrs. Montgomery. The mountains made him that way. He doesn't talk much, and he doesn't suffer fools. But he's honest, and he has his own sense of justice. If he agrees to help you, he'll see it through. If he doesn't, the sheriff shrugged, then I'm afraid you're out of options. Will he want payment? Because I don't have anything. That's between you and him. But Frost isn't motivated by money the way most men are. He might help you just because he despises thieves and cowards, or he might not help at all. Like I said, he's hard to predict. Eliza folded the map and stood. Thank you, Sheriff. I'll go find him. Mrs. Montgomery. Bullock's voice stopped her at the door. Be careful. Frost is a good man in his own way, but he's been alone in those mountains for years. He's not like town folk. Don't expect pretty manners or gentle words. I'm not looking for pretty manners, Eliza said. I'm looking for justice. She left the sheriff's office and returned to her empty house to prepare. She had no horse, which meant walking 10 miles into the hills. She packed what little food she had, some hardtack, dried beef, and a canteen of water, and dressed in her sturdiest clothes. By the time she set out, the sun had climbed toward noon, and she had perhaps 6 hours of daylight left. The walk proved harder than she anticipated. The main trail was well traveled near town, but it grew rougher as she climbed into the hills. Pine trees crowded close on both sides, and the air grew cooler and thinner. Her legs ached, and her feet throbbed in her worn boots, but she kept moving. The thought of Thomas somewhere out there, spending her money on whiskey and card games and painted women, fueled her determination. She reached the lightning-struck pine as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The tree stood stark and dead, its blackened trunk twisted from the lightning strike that had killed it. She took the western fork as Bullock had instructed, following a narrower path that wound through dense forest. Another mile felt like 3 when walking uphill over uneven ground. By the time she spotted the cabin, shadows stretched long between the trees, and exhaustion pulled at every muscle. The cabin was larger than she expected, built of solid logs with a stone chimney. Elk antlers hung above the door, just as Bullock had described. Smoke rose from the chimney, which meant someone was home. Eliza approached slowly, suddenly aware of how isolated she was. If this Gideon Frost proved dangerous or cruel, no one would hear her scream. But she had come too far to turn back now. She climbed the 3 steps to the small porch and knocked firmly on the door. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then she heard heavy footsteps inside. The door swung open, and Eliza found herself staring up at the largest man she had ever seen. Gideon Frost stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to fill the entire doorway. His arms were thick with muscle, visible beneath the rolled-up sleeves of his flannel shirt. His chest was broad, his waist narrow, and everything about him radiated raw physical power. He had dark hair that fell past his shoulders, pulled back from his face with a leather cord, and a beard that was neatly trimmed despite his isolation. His eyes were the color of a winter sky, pale gray blue and sharp as broken glass. Those eyes swept over her now, assessing. You're lost. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. Eliza straightened her spine, refusing to be intimidated despite her exhaustion and fear. No, I'm not lost. I'm looking for Gideon Frost. You found him. He leaned against the doorframe, making no move to invite her inside. What do you want? My husband stole my life savings and ran. Sheriff Bullock said you might help me track him down and get the money back. Frost's expression didn't change. Your husband's problems aren't my concern. He's not the one with the problem, Eliza snapped, too tired and frustrated for diplomacy. I am. He stole from me. $347 I spent 3 years earning, money I needed to survive the winter. He took it and ran off to California, and I need someone to find him and bring back what's mine. Go to the law. I did. Bullock said his jurisdiction doesn't extend that far. He said you were my only option. Frost was silent for a moment, studying her with those cold eyes. I don't chase down wayward husbands for women who made bad choices in marriage. The words stung, partly because they held truth. Eliza had made a bad choice marrying Thomas, but she refused to accept that mistake as a life sentence of poverty and suffering. I'm not asking you to chase down a wayward husband. I'm asking you to track down a thief and recover stolen property. The fact that the thief happens to be legally married to me doesn't change what he did. Sure it does. You're married. That makes it a domestic situation, and I don't get involved in those. We're married on paper only. Thomas Montgomery is a thief and a coward who stole everything I had while I slept and ran like a dog with its tail between its legs. If that's not something worth pursuing, I don't know what is. Eliza's voice rose despite her effort to stay calm. I walked 10 miles to ask for your help. I have nowhere else to turn. If you won't help me, just say so plainly instead of hiding behind excuses. Something flickered in Frost's eyes. Respect, maybe, or amusement. His jaw tightened slightly. It's nearly dark. There's no point walking back to town tonight. You can sleep in the barn. Leave at first light. He started to close the door, but Eliza put her hand against it. The wood felt rough and solid under her palm. Please. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know you don't owe me anything, but that money represented 3 years of my life. 3 years of scrubbing other people's dirty laundry until my hands bled. 3 years of mending clothes by candlelight until my eyes burned. 3 years of hope that I could build something better for myself. He took all of it, every penny, and if I don't get it back, I'll lose everything. The rent's due in a week. I have no savings, no family, no one to turn to. I'll end up... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the reality of what happened to destitute women in towns like Deadwood. Frost looked at her for a long moment. His face remained hard, but something in his gaze softened almost imperceptibly. You got the guts to walk 10 miles through rough country alone, I'll give you that. Most town women wouldn't make it half that distance. I'm not most town women. I can see that. He stepped back from the door. Come inside. You look ready to fall over. Eliza's relief was so intense she felt dizzy. She stepped into the cabin, and Frost closed the door behind her. The interior surprised her. She had expected a rough bachelor's hovel, but the cabin was clean and well organized. A fire burned in the stone hearth, casting warm light over simple but well-made furniture. Furs covered the floor, and a large bed in one corner. Shelves held books, tools, and supplies. A rifle hung over the fireplace, and various traps and hunting equipment lined one wall. Sit, Frost said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. You need food and rest before we talk about anything else. Eliza sank into the chair, grateful beyond words. Now that she had stopped moving, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Her feet throbbed and her legs trembled. Frost moved to the hearth where a pot hung over the fire. He ladled something into a bowl and handed it to her along with a spoon. Venison stew. Eat. The stew was simple but delicious, rich with meat and root vegetables. Eliza ate hungrily while Frost poured her a cup of water from a pitcher. He settled into the chair across from her, his large frame somehow graceful despite his size. Tell me everything, he said, from the beginning. So Eliza told him. She told him about marrying Thomas in a moment of loneliness, about realizing her mistake too late, about working every hour she could to save money. She told him about finding the empty tin box and the callous note. She told him about going to Sheriff Bullock and receiving the directions to this cabin. Frost listened without interrupting, his face impassive, but his eyes sharp and focused. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. $347 is a lot of money. You sure he took it all? Didn't spend some of it first? I counted it 2 days before he left. It was all there. He have any particular friends? Anyone he might have told his plans? Thomas didn't have friends. He had drinking companions, men who would buy him whiskey if he spun a good story, but no one he trusted. Which means he probably didn't tell anyone where he was really going. Frost rubbed his beard thoughtfully. The note said California, but that doesn't mean much. Could be misdirection. You think he went somewhere else? Maybe, or maybe he is heading to California but plans to take a roundabout route to throw off pursuit. Frost stood and moved to a large table where maps lay spread out. 2 days head start. He's likely traveling fast if he knows you'll discover the theft and come after him. Question is, which route would he take? Eliza joined him at the table, studying the maps. They showed the Dakota Territory, Wyoming Territory, and beyond in remarkable detail, with trails and landmarks marked in Frost's neat handwriting. Sheriff Bullock said you know the territory better than anyone. I've traveled most of it over the years, trapped beaver up in the high country, hunted elk in the valleys, traded with various tribes. His finger traced a line on the map. If Thomas is really heading to California, he's got 3 main options. He could go south to Cheyenne and then follow the main route west through Wyoming and across to Utah and Nevada. That's the longest route, but the safest, with established stops and settlements. He could cut southwest more directly, but that takes him through rougher country with fewer towns. Or he could head northwest first to throw off pursuit, then cut west later. Which would you choose if you were running? Frost glanced at her, one eyebrow slightly raised. I wouldn't run. I'd stand and fight. But if you were the kind of man who would steal and run, then I'd take the middle route, southwest through rough country, faster than the southern route, fewer people to remember seeing me, and direct enough that I'd feel like I was making good progress. His finger traced that path on the map. Through the Badlands, across into Wyoming Territory, then push hard for the Continental Divide. Eliza studied the vast distances on the map and felt hope fading again. That's hundreds of miles. How could you possibly track one man across all that? It's what I do. Frost's voice held quiet confidence. I've tracked wounded elk through snow, followed bear sign across bare rock, found lost prospectors in blizzards. A man on horseback heading through rough country will leave traces, hoof prints, disturbed vegetation. Cold campfire sites. You just need to know what to look for and how to read the land. So you'll help me? Eliza held her breath, waiting for his answer. Frost was quiet for a long moment, his pale eyes studying her face. Why does the money matter so much? You're young and clearly capable. You could earn more. It would take years to save that much again. Years of barely surviving, of struggling for every meal, of being vulnerable to every drunk who thinks a woman alone is easy prey. That money represented freedom, a chance to build something stable and secure. Without it, I'm trapped in poverty with no way out. You've lived alone in these mountains by choice. I respect that. But I've lived alone in town out of necessity, and it's not the same thing. Every day is a struggle. Every night is a risk. That money was supposed to change everything. Frost nodded slowly. And your husband? You want him to face justice or just want your money back? I want my money back. What happens to Thomas after that isn't my concern. It should be. Man like that might come after you later, looking for revenge or trying to get whatever else you managed to earn. Eliza hadn't considered that possibility. The thought sent cold dread through her stomach. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that getting your money back isn't enough. Montgomery needs to understand he can't treat people this way and walk away unscathed. He needs consequences that'll make him think twice before trying something like this again. Like what? That depends on how things play out. But at minimum, he needs a beating he won't forget and a message that if he ever shows his face in the Dakota Territory again, he'll face worse. The violence implied in Frost's words should have troubled Eliza, but instead she felt savage satisfaction. Thomas deserved whatever consequences Frost had in mind. When do we leave? Frost's eyes narrowed. We? You don't expect me to sit in town waiting while you track him down, do you? That's my money. I have a right to be there when you recover it. Tracking a man through wilderness territory isn't a Sunday ride, Mrs. Montgomery. We'd be traveling hard through country that'll kill you if you make a mistake. Sleeping on the ground, eating whatever we can hunt or carry, dealing with weather and terrain and possibly hostile encounters. You're not equipped for that. Then teach me. I'm a fast learner. It's not about learning. It's about survival skills you develop over years, not days. I don't care. Eliza met his eyes steadily. That money is mine, and I won't sit passively while someone else determines my fate. If you won't take me with you, I'll follow the route myself. You'd die before you made it 50 miles. Maybe. But at least I'd die trying to fix my situation instead of accepting defeat. Frost stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. It transformed his hard face completely, revealing a warmth she hadn't known existed beneath the stern exterior. You've got more spine than most men I've met. All right, you can come. But you follow my lead, you do exactly what I say when I say it, and if things get dangerous, you stay out of the way. Understood? Understood. We leave before dawn. That gives us tonight to prepare. You're going to need better clothes, better boots, and a complete change in how you think about traveling. He moved to a trunk in the corner and pulled out various items. These were my sister's. She visited a few years back, left some things behind. You're about the same size. Eliza took the clothes he handed her. Sturdy wool pants, a heavy shirt, a warm jacket. Your sister wears pants? She's a practical woman married to a rancher in Montana Territory. She learned quick that skirts are useless for the kind of work ranch life demands. He pulled out boots as well. Try these. The boots fit well enough with an extra pair of thick socks. The pants felt strange after years of wearing skirts, but Eliza had to admit they were far more practical for wilderness travel. While she changed behind a screen in the corner, Frost began assembling supplies. When she emerged, he gave her an appraising look. Better. You'll blend with the landscape now instead of standing out like a flag. That's important. We don't want to attract attention as we travel. Why not? Because not everyone we might encounter will be friendly. The territories are full of men running from something or looking for easy prey. A man and woman traveling together might be seen as targets. Better to move quietly and avoid notice when possible. Eliza absorbed this information, realizing how naive she had been about what this journey would entail. Have you done this kind of thing before? Tracked fugitives, I mean? A few times. Tracked down a man who murdered a prospector for his gold claim. Found a pair of outlaws who robbed a stage, helped a Lakota family locate a stolen horse herd. Frost packed dried meat, hardtack, coffee, and other supplies into leather saddlebags. I don't do it often, prefer to be left alone most of the time, but sometimes a situation comes along that demands action. Why does my situation demand action? He paused, considering the question. Because your husband's a coward and a thief who hurt someone weaker. Because you had the courage to walk 10 miles alone to ask for help. Because... He stopped, seeming unsure how to finish. Because what? Because I hate men who prey on women. My mother was widowed when I was 15, left alone with 4 children and no money. Men in town thought that made her easy pickings, tried to cheat her, pressure her, take advantage. I learned young what happens to women without protection in rough country. His jaw tightened. Your situation reminded me of hers, that's all. Eliza felt unexpected warmth toward this hard mountain man. What happened to your mother? She survived. Raised all 4 of us to adulthood despite everything. She's living with my youngest brother in Denver now, comfortable and safe. Frost's expression softened slightly. Toughest woman I ever knew. You remind me of her a bit. Same stubborn determination. I'll take that as a compliment. It is one. They worked together preparing for the journey, and Eliza found herself stealing glances at Frost when she thought he wasn't looking. In the firelight, with his sleeves rolled up and his hair falling loose around his shoulders, he looked like something from a storybook. Not a prince, nothing so refined, but a warrior from ancient times, all raw strength and primal power. She had never seen a man built like him, all heavy muscle and controlled grace. When he moved, it was with an economy of motion that spoke of complete confidence in his body's capabilities. She caught him watching her once, too, his pale eyes thoughtful. Their gazes met and held for a moment before both looked away. Eliza felt her cheeks warm and told herself firmly that this was purely a business arrangement. Frost was helping her recover her money, nothing more. The fact that he was the most physically impressive man she had ever encountered had nothing to do with anything. By the time they finished preparing, full dark had fallen. Frost banked the fire and gestured to the bed. "You sleep there. I'll take the floor." "I can't take your bed." "You can and will. You need proper rest. Tomorrow will be harder than anything you've experienced." Eliza wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. She lay down on the bed, which was surprisingly comfortable, with furs and blankets that smelled faintly of pine and wood smoke. Frost settled on the floor near the fire, using his pack as a pillow. Despite everything, Eliza felt safe for the first time since discovering the theft. This strange mountain man radiated competence and strength. If anyone could find Thomas and recover her money, it was him. "Frost?" she said softly into the darkness. "Yeah? Thank you for helping me." He was quiet for a moment. "Get some sleep, Mrs. Montgomery. Tomorrow we hunt." Eliza closed her eyes, and despite all her worries, fell almost instantly into deep sleep. The mountain man woke her well before dawn by touching her shoulder gently. Eliza startled awake, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. Frost stood beside the bed, already fully dressed and packed. "Time to move," he said quietly. They ate a quick breakfast of cold biscuits and dried venison while Frost went over the route plan. "We'll start by going to town. Need to confirm which direction Montgomery actually headed and pick up his trail. After that, we'll be in the wilderness for however long this takes. Could be a week, could be 2 or more, depending on how far he got and whether he tries to hide his trail. Will he know he's being followed? Eventually. Man who steals and runs usually keeps looking over his shoulder, but we'll stay far enough back that he won't spot us until we want him to." They stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness, and Eliza gasped softly. The sky blazed with stars so bright and numerous they looked like scattered diamond dust. She had seen stars before, of course, but never like this. Town lights dimmed them. Out here in the wilderness, the full glory of the night sky revealed itself. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Frost said quietly. "One of the things I love about living up here. The sky feels bigger somehow." They walked to a small stable behind the cabin where Frost kept 2 horses. Both were sturdy mountain horses, built for endurance rather than speed. He saddled them efficiently while explaining basics about riding to Eliza, who had limited experience with horses. "This is Smoke," he said, indicating a gray mare with gentle eyes. "She's steady and calm, won't spook easy. Just hold the reins lightly, keep your weight centered, and let her do most of the work." "And yours?" Eliza asked, looking at the larger roan gelding. "This is Bear. Bought him off a Cheyenne trader 3 years ago. Best horse I've ever owned." Frost's voice held genuine affection as he stroked the horse's neck. They mounted up just as the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky. The ride back to Deadwood took less than 2 hours on horseback, following trails that Eliza had struggled to walk the day before. Frost rode with easy confidence, clearly as comfortable on horseback as on foot. They reached town as it came to life, miners heading to their claims and shopkeepers opening for business. Frost led them directly to the sheriff's office, where Seth Bullock looked surprised to see them together. "Frost, didn't expect you'd take this on." "Things change." Frost dismounted and helped Eliza down, his hands strong and sure on her waist. "Need to know which way Montgomery actually headed. Anyone see him leave?" Bullock consulted his notes. "Stable owner said Montgomery bought a horse 2 evenings ago, paid in gold coin, seemed in a hurry, rode out heading south toward Rapid Creek." "South?" Frost repeated, frowning. "Not southwest toward the Badlands?" "Due south. Multiple witnesses saw him. Looked like he was heading for the Cheyenne route." Frost and Eliza exchanged glances. "That's the long way around," she said. "Or he's being clever," Frost replied. "Head south where people will notice and report, then cut west once he's out of sight. Makes sense if he's worried about pursuit. We'll pick up his trail at Rapid Creek and see where it really goes." They bought additional supplies at the general store, including a bedroll for Eliza, ammunition, and extra food. The proprietor gave them curious looks but asked no questions. Small-town gossip traveled fast, though, and Eliza knew that by nightfall everyone would be talking about how she had hired the mountain man to track down her thieving husband. Let them talk. She had more important concerns. They left Deadwood behind, riding south under a clear blue sky. September in the Dakota Territory brought perfect weather, with warm days and cool nights. Frost set a steady pace, not pushing hard but covering ground efficiently. He pointed out landmarks and trail signs, beginning Eliza's education in wilderness travel. "See those broken branches?" He indicated a spot where brush had been disturbed. "Horse pushed through there recently. See how the brakes are still fresh, not dried out? That's within the last day or two." Eliza studied the signs, trying to understand what Frost saw so clearly. To her untrained eye, it looked like random damage. But as he continued pointing out details, hoofprints in soft earth, disturbed rocks, bent grass, she began to see patterns emerge. They reached Rapid Creek by mid-afternoon and began searching for signs of Montgomery's passage. Frost worked methodically, walking the banks and examining the ground with intense focus. Finally, he stopped and crouched, studying something Eliza couldn't see. "Found him. Crossed here, then headed west along the far bank," he pointed. "See the prints? Fresh, deep. Horse was carrying significant weight." "The money," Eliza said. $347 in mixed coin would weigh a lot. Plus supplies and gear. He's loaded heavy, which will slow him down." Frost stood and brushed dirt from his hands. "Good. We can make up time." They crossed the creek and followed the trail west. Frost had been right about Montgomery's route. Instead of continuing south toward Cheyenne, he had cut west almost immediately, heading into rougher country. The land grew wilder as they traveled, with rolling hills giving way to broken Badlands terrain. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, Frost began looking for a campsite. He chose a spot in a small canyon with good shelter and access to water from a seasonal stream. While Eliza tended the horses under his direction, Frost built a fire and prepared dinner. "No coffee," he said as they ate. "Smoke and smell carry too far. Don't want to announce our presence if there's anyone else traveling through here." "You think Montgomery would have allies?" "Doubtful, but better safe than sorry." Frost fed small sticks to the fire, keeping it minimal. "We'll take turns on watch tonight, 4 hours each. I'll take first watch." "Watch for what?" "Anything. Animals, people, weather changes. Wilderness doesn't sleep, and neither should we entirely." That night, lying in her bedroll under a sky full of stars, Eliza felt more alive than she had in years. Despite the circumstances, despite the discomfort and danger, something inside her sang with fierce joy. She was doing something, taking action instead of passively accepting her fate, and she was doing it with a man who made her feel safer than she had ever felt with Thomas. She woke for her watch shift and found Frost adding small branches to the fire. He showed her how to listen to the night sounds, how to distinguish normal animal noises from potential threats, how to stay alert without becoming paranoid. "You're doing well," he said quietly before settling into his bedroll. "Most first-timers would be complaining by now." "I'm too angry to complain. Every mile we cover is a mile closer to getting my money back." Frost smiled slightly. "That anger will keep you going when exhaustion sets in. Hold on to it." Over the next 3 days, they fell into a rhythm. Rise before dawn, ride until midday, rest the horses during the hottest hours, ride again until sunset. Frost taught Eliza constantly how to read the land, how to move quietly, how to find water and identify edible plants. She absorbed everything like a sponge, discovering capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. Montgomery's trail remained clear. He was pushing hard, but not covering his tracks, probably assuming no one would pursue him this far. Frost estimated they were gaining on him, closing the gap by several hours each day. On the 4th day, they found his campsite from 2 nights previous. Frost examined everything carefully: the fire pit, the disturbed ground where Montgomery had slept, the area where his horse had been tethered. "He's getting careless," Frost said. "Left garbage, didn't fully extinguish his fire. Signs of a man who thinks he's safe." "How far ahead is he now?" "Maybe a day, day and a half. We'll catch him soon." That night, camped in a grove of cottonwoods near a small pond, Frost seemed more relaxed than usual. They had coffee for the first time since leaving Deadwood, the smell rich and wonderful in the cool evening air. Eliza sat across the fire from him, studying his face in the flickering light. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. Frost looked up from the stick he was whittling. "You can ask, I might not answer." Why do you live alone in the mountains? A man with your skills could make good money as a guide or tracker." He was quiet for a long moment. "I lived in civilization once, worked in Denver for a while, tried to be a normal man with a normal life. Couldn't do it. Too many people, too much noise, too many rules and expectations. Felt like I was suffocating." He gestured at the wilderness around them. "Out here, I can breathe. I answer to no one but myself. I live by my own rules, make my own choices. That freedom is worth more than money." "Don't you get lonely?" "Sometimes, but loneliness is better than feeling trapped." His pale eyes met hers across the fire. "What about you? Why did you marry Montgomery if he was such a poor choice?" Eliza sighed. "I was lonely too. My parents had died. I was alone in a rough town, and Thomas seemed safe, I suppose. He had a job. He could be charming when he wanted, and I thought marriage would give me security. I was wrong. By the time I realized my mistake, I was already trapped in it." "You're not trapped anymore." "No," Eliza agreed, "though I'm not sure what comes after we recover the money. Going back to Deadwood alone seems like returning to the same situation that led me to marry Thomas in the first place. So don't go back. There are other towns, other territories. You've got skills. You could start fresh somewhere new." The idea had appeal, but also frightened her. "I've never been brave enough to just pick up and start over somewhere completely new." "You walked 10 miles alone to ask a stranger for help tracking your husband through wilderness territory. That takes a particular kind of courage. Don't sell yourself short, Mrs. Montgomery." "Eliza," she said. "Please call me Eliza. Mrs. Montgomery was someone who let herself be a victim. That's not who I am anymore." Frost nodded slowly. "Eliza then, and you can call me Gideon." Gideon. She liked how his name felt in her mouth, strong and solid like the man himself. "Thank you for all of this. I know I've already said it, but I mean it. You didn't have to help me." "Yes, I did." His voice was soft but certain. "Some things demand action. This was one of them." They sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the fire burn down to coals. Eliza found herself studying Gideon when she thought he wasn't looking, admiring the strong line of his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders, the way firelight played across the planes of his face. He was nothing like Thomas, who had been soft and weak despite his cruel streak. Gideon was all strength and competence, the kind of man who could protect and provide without breaking under pressure. She caught him watching her too, his expression unreadable but something warm in his eyes. Their gazes met and held, and Eliza felt her breath catch. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and unspoken questions. Then Gideon looked away, clearing his throat. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow might be the day we catch up to him." Eliza nodded, not trusting her voice. As she settled into her bedroll, she realized with startling clarity that she was developing feelings for this mountain man. Real feelings, not the desperate loneliness that had led her to Thomas. Gideon made her feel safe but also challenged, protected but also respected. He saw her as an equal partner in this endeavor, not a helpless woman who needed to be coddled. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She barely knew him. This partnership was temporary, formed out of necessity. Once they recovered her money, Gideon would return to his mountain cabin and his solitary life, and she would return to whatever came next. Letting herself care about him seemed like a recipe for heartbreak. But her heart, it seemed, had other ideas. The next morning brought lower clouds and a chill wind that promised rain. Gideon studied the sky with a frown as they broke camp. "Weather's turning. Need to move faster today." They pushed the horses harder, covering ground at a near trot when terrain allowed. Gideon's focus had intensified, all his attention on the trail ahead. Around midday, he held up a hand for Eliza to stop. "For fresh prints from this morning." He dismounted and examined the ground closely. "He's less than 3 hours ahead now." Eliza's pulse quickened. "So we'll catch him today? If we're smart about it, he'll be looking for a place to camp soon. Weather's getting worse." As if to emphasize his point, the first fat raindrops began to fall. "We need to find him before the rain washes out his trail completely." They rode on through increasing rain, water soaking through their clothes despite their heavy jackets. The trail grew harder to follow as the ground turned to mud, but Gideon pressed on with grim determination. Eliza marveled at his ability to find signs even in these conditions, a disturbed rock here, a bent branch there, subtle clues she would have missed entirely. Late afternoon found them in a narrow valley between steep hills. Gideon stopped suddenly and signaled for quiet. He pointed ahead where smoke rose from behind an outcropping of rock, barely visible in the rain. "There," he breathed. "He's made camp early because of the weather." They dismounted and tied the horses out of sight. Gideon pulled his rifle from its scabbard and checked that it was loaded. "Stay behind me. If things go bad, get back to the horses and ride for Deadwood. I'm not leaving you. Eliza." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Montgomery's a coward, but cornered cowards can be dangerous. If shooting starts, I need to know you're safe. Please." She wanted to argue but recognized the sense in his words. "All right, but be careful." They moved forward on foot, using the rain and terrain for cover. As they approached the campsite, Eliza could make out a small tent and a horse tied nearby. Smoke rose from a fire that struggled to stay lit in the wet conditions. A figure sat, huddled under a blanket near the fire. Thomas. Rage surged through Eliza at the sight of him. He sat there comfortable and dry while she had spent days riding through rough country to recover what he had stolen. Gideon must have sensed her anger because he put a hand on her arm, steadying her. They crept closer until they were perhaps 50 feet away. Then Gideon stepped out from behind their cover, rifle raised and aimed at Thomas. "Montgomery, don't move." Thomas jumped to his feet, the blanket falling away. Even from this distance, Eliza could see the fear on his face. "Who are you? What do you want?" "I want the money you stole from your wife." Gideon's voice was calm and cold. "You're going to give it back, now." Thomas's eyes darted around, looking for escape routes. Then he saw Eliza stepping out behind Gideon, and his expression twisted with anger and contempt. "You brought someone after me? Couldn't just let me go?" "You stole everything I had." Eliza's voice shook with fury. "Did you really think I'd just accept that?" "That money was as much mine as yours. We're married. What's yours is mine." "Marriage doesn't give you the right to steal and run, you coward." Gideon took several steps closer, rifle never wavering. "The money. Hand it over." Thomas backed toward his horse, and Gideon's voice turned sharp. "Don't even think about it. You won't make it 3 steps before I put a bullet in your leg. You can't shoot me. That's murder. It's not murder if you're fleeing from a crime, and stealing $347 is a felony." Gideon's expression was granite hard. "Last chance. The money." For a moment, Eliza thought Thomas would try to run anyway. Then his shoulders sagged and he moved to his saddlebags. He pulled out a heavy leather pouch and threw it on the ground between them. "There, take it. It's not worth dying over." Gideon gestured for Eliza to retrieve the pouch, keeping his rifle trained on Thomas. She hurried forward and grabbed it, her hands shaking. The weight felt right. She opened it and saw mixed coins glinting inside silver dollars, gold eagles, smaller denominations. Her money. All of it. "Count it," Gideon ordered. "Make sure it's all there." Eliza poured the coins out and counted quickly. $347 exactly, not a penny missing. Relief flooded through her so intensely she felt dizzy. "It's all here." "Good." Gideon's attention never left Thomas. "Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay right where you are while we ride out. You're not going to follow us. You're not going to return to Deadwood. You're not going to contact Eliza ever again. If you do any of those things, I will hunt you down and make you regret it. Understood?" Thomas nodded, sullen and defeated. "I didn't hear you." "I understand," Thomas spat. "Good. One more thing." Gideon lowered the rifle slightly. "You ever steal from someone weaker than you again, word will reach me. And when it does, I won't be this generous. I'll find you and make an example of you. Spread the word to every thief and coward you meet. Gideon Frost doesn't tolerate men who prey on women." He gestured for Eliza to move back toward their horses. She clutched the pouch of coins, unable to take her eyes off Thomas. This man she had married, who she had tried to build a life with, looked small and pathetic, crouching by his dying fire. She felt no sympathy for him, only disgust. "You never deserved her," Gideon said quietly, his words meant for Thomas alone but carrying clearly in the rain. You had a strong, brave, determined woman, and you threw it away for a bag of coins. You're a fool and a coward, and you'll die alone because of it. They backed away from the camp, Gideon keeping his rifle ready until they were well clear. Then they moved quickly to their horses and mounted up. As they rode away, Eliza looked back once to see Thomas still standing by his fire, watching them go. They rode hard for an hour, putting distance between themselves and Thomas's camp. Finally, Gideon slowed and led them to a sheltered spot beneath an overhang of rock where the rain couldn't reach. He built a fire while Eliza saw to the horses, her hands still trembling with reaction. When the fire burned strong and they had stripped off their wet outer clothes to dry, Gideon poured coffee and handed her a cup. You did well back there, stayed calm, followed instructions. I wanted to hit him, Eliza admitted. Watching him sit there comfortable after what he did to me, I've never felt rage like that before. Rage has its place, but you controlled it instead of letting it control you. That takes strength. Gideon studied her over the rim of his cup. What will you do now? You have your money back. You could return to Deadwood, start your boarding house like you planned. Eliza had been thinking about that very question during their ride. Now, sitting here with Gideon in the firelight, she found herself voicing thoughts she hadn't fully formed until this moment. I don't think I want to go back. Deadwood holds nothing but bad memories now. Every street corner would remind me of my marriage to Thomas, of the mistakes I made. Where would you go instead? I don't know. Somewhere new, somewhere I could truly start fresh. She met his eyes. What about you? Back to your cabin and your solitary life? Something flickered in Gideon's expression. That was the plan. Was. He set down his coffee cup and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. These past days with you have reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That being alone isn't always the same as being at peace. That some kinds of solitude are chosen, and some are just hiding. Eliza's heart beat faster. And which kind were you? I thought I was choosing solitude. Now I'm not so sure. His pale eyes held hers, intense and searching. You asked if I got lonely. The answer's yes, but I told myself it was better than the alternative. These days with you have made me question that. What are you saying, Gideon? He stood and moved around the fire to sit beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his large frame. I'm saying that tracking down your thieving husband wasn't the hardship I expected. I'm saying I've enjoyed your company more than I've enjoyed anyone's in years. I'm saying that the thought of riding back to my cabin alone after this doesn't sit right anymore. Eliza could barely breathe. What sits right instead? You do. His voice was rough with emotion. Everything about you sits right. Your courage, your strength, your determination. The way you face challenges instead of running from them. The way you push back when I'm being too hard. The way you look at me like I'm not some mountain savage, but a man worth knowing. He reached out and gently tucked a strand of damp hair behind her ear, his calloused fingers surprisingly tender. I know it's too soon. I know we've only known each other a few days, but Eliza, I haven't felt this way about anyone in my entire life. Joy burst through Eliza's chest like sunshine. I feel the same way. From that first moment when you opened your cabin door, something in me recognized something in you. You make me feel safe but also seen. Like I matter for who I am, not what I can provide or what role I fill. She placed her hand over his where it rested against her cheek. I don't want to go back to Deadwood either, but I also don't want to say goodbye to you. Gideon's face transformed with a smile of pure relief and happiness. Then don't. Come with me. Not back to the cabin that's too isolated for a permanent life together, but we could go somewhere new. Find a town on the edge of civilization where someone with my skills and your determination could build something good. A place where we'd have each other and also community when we needed it. You'd give up your solitary life for that. For me. In a heartbeat, he cupped her face in both hands now, his touch gentle despite his strength. I've been alone long enough, Eliza. I want to be with you, if you'll have me. Yes, the word came out as a whisper, choked with emotion. Yes, I'll have you. Gideon leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Eliza didn't want to pull away. She met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning. Then it deepened as they both gave in to the emotions that had been building between them for days. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Gideon rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. I should probably ask properly. Eliza Montgomery, would you consider courting me with the intention of marriage once your divorce from that fool is finalized? Eliza laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. Yes, though the divorce might take time. I'll need to file papers, establish grounds. Abandonment and theft are pretty solid grounds. We've got witnesses and evidence. Sheriff Bullock can help with the legal process. Gideon pulled back enough to look at her seriously. I'll wait as long as it takes. I've waited 32 years to find someone like you. A few more months won't kill me. 32, Eliza repeated. I'm 24. Is that too much of a difference? You tell me, do I seem too old? Eliza studied his face, strong and weathered but not aged. No, you seem exactly right. They spent the rest of the evening making plans. Gideon knew of a town in Montana territory near where his sister lived that was growing and could use someone with his skills as a guide and hunter. Eliza could start her boarding house there in a place without the dark associations of Deadwood. They would travel together, taking their time, letting their relationship develop naturally. That night, they slept close to the fire, Gideon's arms wrapped protectively around Eliza. She felt safer and more content than she had in years. The money pouch rested beneath her bedroll, but it no longer seemed as important as it had. The money would help them start their new life, but it was just money. What mattered was the man holding her and the future they would build together. The rain stopped before dawn, and they woke to a world washed clean. As they broke camp and prepared to ride out, Eliza felt a profound sense of gratitude. Thomas's theft had led her to Gideon. His betrayal had been the push she needed to stop settling for less than she deserved. In trying to destroy her, he had inadvertently set her free. They rode north and west, taking a different route back than they had come. Gideon pointed out landmarks and told her stories of his time in the mountains. Eliza shared stories of her own life growing up on a farm in Ohio, losing her parents, struggling to survive in Deadwood. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other with the eager fascination of new love. On the third day of their return journey, they stopped at a small settlement for supplies. While Gideon dealt with the trading post owner, Eliza noticed a family loading their wagon, a tired-looking woman with 3 young children and an older man who looked like her father. They were clearly preparing to travel, and the woman's expression held the same desperation Eliza remembered feeling not so long ago. On impulse, Eliza approached them. "Excuse me, I couldn't help noticing you're preparing for a journey. Can I ask where you're headed?" The woman looked wary but answered, "California. My husband died last month, and we can't keep the farm. Hoping to find work out west." "That's a long, hard journey, especially with children." "We don't have much choice." The woman's voice was tight with stress. Eliza glanced back at the trading post, where Gideon was emerging with their supplies. She thought about the pouch of money, about how it had represented her entire future. Then she thought about how much her future had changed in just a few days, and how money, while important, wasn't everything. "Wait here," she told the woman. She met Gideon and explained the situation. "They need help. I want to give them some of the money." Gideon didn't hesitate. "How much?" $50, enough to make their journey safer, to buy supplies and have a cushion for emergencies. "That's generous." "I can afford to be generous now. I have you." She smiled up at him. "And I still have almost $300. That's more than enough for us to start over." Gideon kissed her forehead. "You have a good heart, Eliza." She retrieved $50 from the pouch and returned to the family. The woman's eyes went wide when Eliza pressed the coins into her hand. "I can't take this. It's too much." "You can, and you will. Use it to get your family safely to California. Use it to start fresh. That's what it's for, new beginnings." The woman burst into tears and hugged Eliza tightly. "God bless you. Thank you. Thank you so much." As they rode away from the settlement, Gideon reached over and squeezed Eliza's hand. "That was well done. It felt right, like passing on the help I received. You're going to do good things in Montana, Eliza. I can feel it." They reached Deadwood 5 days after confronting Thomas. Sheriff Bullock was surprised and pleased to see them return together, and even more surprised when they explained what they wanted. "You want to file for divorce on grounds of abandonment and theft, and you want to do it from Montana territory?" Bullock clarified. "That's right," Eliza confirmed. "We'll be settling there. But I need the divorce to be legal and final." "It'll take time, but it can be done. You've got strong grounds and evidence. Montgomery's unlikely to contest it even if we could find him to serve papers." Bullock looked between them, a knowing smile on his weathered face. "I had a feeling when I sent you to Frost. You two seem well suited." They spent 2 days in Deadwood settling Eliza's affairs. She sold what few possessions she had left, paid off her outstanding rent, and formally filed divorce papers. Several women in town approached her privately to congratulate her on escaping Thomas and finding someone better. Apparently, her husband's true character had been well known, and most people were glad to see her free of him. On their last evening in town, Gideon took Eliza to a small restaurant for a proper meal. They sat in the corner, and he reached across the table to take her hand. "Tomorrow we start our new life. Are you ready?" "I've been ready since the moment you agreed to help me," Eliza smiled, though I had no idea then that helping me meant all of this. "Neither did I. Best decision I ever made, though." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I love you, Eliza. I know it's fast, but it's true. I've loved you since you stood on my porch exhausted and desperate and still refusing to back down. You're the strongest woman I've ever met." "I love you too." The words came easily, naturally. "You saved me, Gideon, not just by recovering my money, but by showing me I could be strong on my own, that I didn't need to settle for men like Thomas, that I deserved someone who saw me as an equal partner. You didn't need me to show you that. You already knew it. I just helped you remember." They left Deadwood at dawn the next morning, riding north toward Montana territory. The journey took 2 weeks, following established trails and stopping at settlements along the way. Everywhere they went, people treated them as a couple, and neither corrected the assumption. It felt right, natural, as if they had always been together. Gideon's sister, Sarah, lived on a ranch outside a growing town called Livingston, near the Yellowstone River. She was a tall, capable woman with her brother's pale eyes and a warm smile. She took one look at Eliza and pulled her into a fierce hug. "So you're the one who finally dragged my brother out of his mountain hermitage. About time someone did." Over dinner that night, they told Sarah the whole story. She listened with rapt attention, occasionally interjecting with sharp questions or exclamations. When they finished, she shook her head in amazement. "That's quite a tale. Thomas Montgomery sounds like an absolute waste of skin, pardon my language. But it brought you two together, so I suppose even waste can serve a purpose." She studied them both. "You planning to settle in Livingston?" "If it seems right," Gideon said. "Eliza wants to start a boarding house. I can guide and hunt." "We need both. Town's growing fast with the railroad coming through. Lots of workers and travelers needing places to stay and people to show them the territory." Sarah nodded decisively. "I know a property that might work. 2-story building right on Main Street. Owner died last year and his widow's looking to sell. It would make a perfect boarding house." They looked at the property the next day, and Eliza fell in love immediately. It was solid and well built, with 8 bedrooms upstairs and a large kitchen and dining area downstairs. There was even a small cottage out back where she and Gideon could live once they were married. The price was fair, and with her recovered savings and some work from Gideon, they could make it happen. Over the next months, they poured their energy into renovating the building. Gideon proved to be skilled with carpentry and repairs. Eliza scrubbed and painted and sewed curtains. Sarah helped whenever she could, and soon other townspeople joined in. Livingston was the kind of place where neighbors helped neighbors, where community meant something. Eliza's divorce papers came through in January 1877. The judge in Deadwood had ruled in her favor on all counts, declaring the marriage dissolved due to abandonment, theft, and failure to provide. Thomas had not contested or even responded to the filing, which simplified everything. 3 days after receiving the papers, Gideon proposed formally. He took Eliza out to a high meadow overlooking the valley, where snow-capped mountains rose against a brilliant blue sky. He got down on one knee and presented her with a ring he had crafted himself silver with a blue stone that matched her eyes. "Eliza, You're my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she said, pulling him up to kiss him. "Yes, absolutely yes." They married in March, in a simple ceremony at Sarah's ranch with half the town in attendance. Eliza wore a dress of cream-colored wool that Sarah had helped her make. Gideon wore his best clothes, his long hair tied back neatly. He looked almost civilized except for the raw power that radiated from him, the mountain man barely contained in formal attire. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Gideon kissed Eliza with such tenderness and passion that several women in attendance sighed audibly. This was what marriage should be. Two people who chose each other freely, who saw each other clearly, who brought out the best in each other. The boarding house opened in April, and within a week every room was full. Eliza discovered she had a talent for hospitality, for making people feel welcome and cared for. Gideon divided his time between guiding work and helping with the boarding house. He was less social than Eliza, but the guests respected his quiet competence and the obvious love between the couple. Life fell into a rhythm that felt both productive and peaceful. They worked hard, but also made time for each other, taking evening rides into the hills or spending quiet hours reading together by the fire. Eliza had never been happier. Every day she woke up grateful for her business, for her home, for the man beside her. In October, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. She told Gideon one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset over the mountains. He was quiet for a long moment, then swept her into his arms with a whoop of joy. "A baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby. When?" "May or June, the doctor thinks." Gideon placed his large hand on her still flat belly, his expression one of wonder. "I'm going to be a father. I'll try my best to be a good one." "You'll be wonderful." Eliza covered his hand with hers. "You're already wonderful." Their son was born in early June 1878, a healthy baby with his father's pale eyes and his mother's auburn hair. They named him Daniel, after Gideon's father. From the moment Gideon held his son, Eliza saw a new dimension to the man she loved. He was patient and gentle with the baby, singing softly in a language he had learned from Cheyenne friends, rocking Daniel for hours when he was fussy. The boarding house continued to thrive with Sarah's help during Eliza's recovery. By the time Daniel was 3 months old, Eliza was back to managing things with the baby in a sling on her back or napping in a cradle in the kitchen. Guests cooed over him, and the older women offered advice that Eliza sometimes took and sometimes politely ignored. 2 years later, their daughter was born Emma, named after Gideon's mother. She had Gideon's dark hair and Eliza's determination, making her opinions known from day one. Gideon adored both children fiercely, and Eliza often found him reading to them or teaching them to identify animal tracks before they could even walk properly. Life wasn't always easy. The boarding house demanded constant work. Money was sometimes tight. Winters were harsh. But through it all, Eliza and Gideon faced challenges together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. 5 years after that morning when Eliza discovered her savings gone, she stood on the porch of her thriving boarding house watching Gideon play with Daniel and Emma in the yard. The business was successful, their home was paid for, and they had money saved for the children's future. But more than any of that, she had love. Real love, built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. Sarah joined her on the porch, bouncing her own toddler son on her hip. "You're looking thoughtful. Everything all right?" "Better than all right," Eliza smiled. "I was just thinking how strange life is. If Thomas hadn't stolen my money, I never would have gone to Gideon's cabin. I never would have found this life. Thomas did you a favor then, though he didn't mean to. The best favor anyone ever did me was to leave." Eliza watched Gideon lift Daniel onto his shoulders, while Emma clung to his leg, both children shrieking with laughter. "And the best decision I ever made was to fight for what was mine instead of accepting defeat. You fought for more than money in the end." "I did. I fought for dignity, for justice, for the right to determine my own future. The money was just the beginning." She glanced at Sarah. "Have you ever heard what happened to Thomas? Does anyone know where he ended up?" Sarah shrugged. "Last I heard, he was working as a stable hand in San Francisco, drinking himself to death slowly by all accounts. A small man leading a small life." Eliza felt no satisfaction in that, but no regret either. Thomas had made his choices, and she had made hers. Their paths had diverged that day in the rain when Gideon confronted him, and she had never looked back. Gideon caught her eye from the yard and smiled, that rare, warm smile that transformed his hard features. He gestured for her to join them, and Eliza descended from the porch, leaving Sarah to her own contemplation. As she reached her family, Gideon wrapped his free arm around her, while Daniel rode on his shoulders and Emma clung to both of them. They stood there together, a unit forged from adversity and choice, from courage and love. "Happy?" Gideon asked softly, his lips brushing her temple. "Completely." Eliza looked up at him, this mountain man who had hunted down her thief of a husband, and in doing so had captured her heart. "I have everything I ever wanted, and things I didn't even know to dream of." "Same here." His arm tightened around her. "You saved me too, you know. I was just existing up in that cabin, calling it freedom. You showed me what freedom really is, choosing to be with someone because you want to, not because you need to." That night, after the children were asleep and the boarding house guests had retired, Eliza and Gideon sat together on their porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The mountains rose dark against the horizon, and somewhere an owl called, its voice echoing through the valley. "Tell me again," Eliza said, nestled against Gideon's side. "About the day I came to your cabin." He chuckled, knowing she loved this story. "You knocked on my door looking like a drowned cat and a warrior combined, exhausted but fierce. You told me your husband had stolen your money and you needed help getting it back. And what did you think? I thought you were either the bravest or the most foolish woman I'd ever met. Maybe both." His hand stroked her hair gently. "Then you put your hand against my door when I tried to close it and told me that money represented 3 years of your life. The way you said it, such dignity and determination, despite being broke and desperate, I knew I couldn't turn you away." "What would have happened if you had?" "You would have gone after him yourself and probably gotten hurt or lost. The thought made me angry. So I let you in. And you changed my entire life." He kissed the top of her head. "Best day of my life, that day. Even better than our wedding, though don't tell the preacher I said so." Eliza laughed. "Our wedding was wonderful." "It was, but that first day was when everything began, when I started living again instead of just surviving." They sat in comfortable silence, and Eliza thought about the journey that had brought them here. The pain of Thomas's betrayal, the desperation of her situation, the courage it took to walk 10 miles to ask a stranger for help. Every step had been necessary. Every hardship had led to this moment of peace and contentment. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The mountain, the solitude, the freedom of living alone?" "Sometimes I miss the quiet. But then Daniel asks me to teach him to track deer, or Emma demands I read her a story, or you smile at me across the dinner table, and I realize the quiet was just emptiness pretending to be peace." He tilted her face up to look at her. "You filled all that emptiness, Eliza. You and our children. This life we've built is worth more than 1,000 peaceful mountains." "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too. Always will." The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and challenges. The boarding house expanded, requiring an addition to accommodate more guests. Daniel grew tall and strong like his father, showing early talent for tracking and wilderness skills. Emma proved to have her mother's head for business, helping with accounts and guest management before she was 12. In 1885, Eliza gave birth to another son, Nathan, and 2 years later, a second daughter, Grace. The house rang with children's laughter and the constant activity of a thriving business. Gideon proved to be an exceptional father, patient and firm in equal measure, teaching his children to be competent and kind. Livingston itself grew and prospered. The railroad brought more people, more opportunities. Eliza's boarding house became known as the finest in the territory, where guests were treated like family and the food was always excellent. Gideon's reputation as a guide and tracker brought wealthy sportsmen from back east who paid premium prices for his services. But more than business success, they built a real community. Their home became a gathering place where neighbors met to celebrate or mourn, where travelers found not just lodging, but genuine welcome. Eliza never forgot what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and she made sure no one who came to her door left without help if she could provide it. On a warm evening in June 1890, Eliza and Gideon celebrated their 13th wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner after the children had gone to bed. They sat at the table holding hands, and Eliza marveled at how much had changed since that desperate morning she discovered her money gone. 13 years, she said. Sometimes it feels like we've always been together, and sometimes I remember being so alone I thought I'd die of it. You were never going to die of loneliness. You're too strong for that. Gideon's thumb traced patterns on her hand. But I'm glad you don't have to be strong alone anymore. We're lucky, you know. Most people never find this. Real partnership, real love. It's not luck. We chose this. Every day we choose each other, choose this life. That's not luck. That's commitment. Eliza stood and moved around the table to sit in Gideon's lap, something she still did despite years of marriage and 4 children. He wrapped his arms around her, as strong and sure as ever, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "Tell me the future," she said, an old game between them. "The future? Let me see." Gideon pretended to think deeply. "Daniel will become a guide like me, but better. He'll fall in love with some smart girl who'll keep him on his toes. Emma will probably run this boarding house someday, or maybe start a business of her own. She's got your entrepreneurial spirit. Nathan and Grace will find their own paths, whatever those may be. And us? We'll grow old together. Watch our children become adults, meet our grandchildren, probably argue about who has to use the cane first when our bodies start failing." His voice was warm with affection. "We'll sit on this porch on warm evenings and tell the same stories over and over, the way old couples do. And we'll still love each other just as much as we do now, maybe more because we'll have even more years of memories to cherish." "That sounds perfect." "It does, doesn't it?" Gideon kissed her softly. "Thank you, Eliza." "For what?" "For walking 10 miles to my cabin that day, for being brave enough to demand my help, for choosing to love me despite how rough I am around the edges, for building this life with me, for everything." Eliza pulled back to look at him, this mountain man who had become her husband, her partner, her best friend. His dark hair was starting to show gray at the temples now, and lines creased his face from years of squinting into wilderness sun. But his pale eyes were as sharp as ever, and the strength in his arms hadn't diminished. He was still the most magnificent man she had ever seen. "I should be thanking you. You hunted down my thief of a husband and gave me back more than money. You gave me back myself. We saved each other then." "Yes," Eliza agreed, kissing him again. "Yes, we did." As the years continued to unfold, that truth remained constant. They had saved each other that day in the mountains, and they continued saving each other every day after, from loneliness, from hardship, from the countless challenges life threw at them. Together they were stronger, better, more complete than either could have been alone. Their children grew and thrived. Daniel did become a guide, marrying a teacher from back east who loved the wilderness as much as he did. Emma took over managing the boarding house when Eliza decided to semi-retire, running it with the same care and competence her mother had shown. Nathan became a veterinarian, the first in the family to attend university. Grace surprised everyone by becoming a journalist, traveling the territories to write about life in the changing West. Through it all, Eliza and Gideon remained each other's constant. They took long rides into the mountains when they could, recapturing some of that wilderness freedom they had shared on their first journey together. They sat on their porch in the evenings, sometimes talking, sometimes simply existing in comfortable silence. They laughed together and cried together and faced every joy and sorrow as partners. On their 20th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a celebration at the boarding house. Half the town attended, sharing stories of how Eliza and Gideon had helped them over the years. Person after person stood to toast the couple, speaking of kindness given and support offered. But the toast Eliza remembered best came from Sarah, who stood with her own grown children beside her. 20 years ago, my brother was a hermit in a mountain cabin, convinced he was better off alone. Then, Eliza came along and proved him wonderfully wrong. She reminded him that strength doesn't mean isolation, that courage sometimes means accepting help, and that real freedom comes from choosing who you love. They've built something beautiful together, a marriage, a family, a business, a community. Here's to 20 more years, and 20 after that. and however many more the good Lord grants them. That night, lying in bed with Gideon's arms around her, Eliza thought about that terrified woman who had discovered her savings gone so many years ago. She had thought her life was over. She had thought she had lost everything. Instead, she had found everything. She had found herself, her strength, her purpose. And she had found love, real, deep, abiding love, with a man who saw her truly and loved what he saw. "What are you thinking?" Gideon asked softly in the darkness. "That Thomas Montgomery did me the greatest favor of my life when he stole my money and ran." Gideon chuckled. "That's one way to look at it. It's the true way. If he hadn't betrayed me, I never would have found you, never would have discovered how strong I could be, never would have built this life." She turned in his arms to face him. "Every good thing in my life started the day I knocked on your cabin door." "Same here." His hand cupped her face gently. "Every good thing started when I opened that door and saw a fierce, desperate, brave woman who refused to accept defeat." They kissed then, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 20 years of love and trust and partnership. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines and an owl called in the darkness. Inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Eliza and Gideon were exactly where they belonged. The mountain man had hunted down her bad husband and returned her coin, yes. But more than that, he had shown her a different kind of wealth, the wealth of true partnership, genuine love, and a life built on mutual respect and shared dreams. That wealth proved far more valuable than any amount of money could ever be. And on cold winter nights when the wind howled around their house and the children were grown and gone to their own lives, Eliza and Gideon would sit by the fire and tell the story again. How a theft led to a journey, how a journey led to love, how love led to everything that mattered. It was their story, unique and precious, forged in the wild territories of the American West, in a time when life was hard, but possibilities were endless for those brave enough to seize them. "Do you remember?" Eliza would ask in her later years, her hair gone white but her eyes still sharp. "What you said to Thomas when you confronted him?" "Which part?" Gideon would reply, his voice rougher with age but still strong. "The part where you told him he never deserved me." "I remember. It was true then, and it's true now. He was a fool to let you go." "I'm glad he was a fool. I'm glad he stole from me. I'm glad for every mistake and hardship, because they all led here. To you, to us." And Gideon would take her hand, gnarled with age but still capable, and say what he had said countless times over countless years. "Best day of my life, when you knocked on my door. Every day since has been better because of you." That was their truth, their story, their life. A bad husband had fled with her savings. A mountain man had hunted him down and returned the coin. But the real treasure wasn't the money recovered. It was the love discovered, the partnership forged, the life built together out of courage and choice and commitment. In the end, that was worth more than all the gold in California, all the silver in the mines, all the dollars and coins in the entire West. Love, real and true and hard-won, was the greatest treasure of all. And Eliza and Gideon had found it together in the wild mountains of the Dakota Territory on a desperate journey to recover stolen money. They had found each other, and that made all the difference. Their story became legend in Livingston, told and retold until nobody could quite separate fact from embellishment. But the core remained true. A woman wronged, a mountain man moved to action, a journey through wilderness that became a journey to love. Young couples would ask them for advice, and Eliza would always say the same thing. "Don't settle for someone who doesn't see your worth. Don't accept treatment that diminishes you. Be brave enough to fight for what you deserve, and wise enough to recognize love when it appears, even if it comes in unexpected packaging." And Gideon would add in his gruff way, "Real strength isn't about being alone. It's about choosing the right person to be strong with. And when you find that person, you hold on and you don't let go, no matter what storms come." They lived to see their grandchildren grow, to see Livingston transform from a rough frontier town to a proper city. They saw the Old West fade into memory and a new century dawn. Through it all, they remained together, their love the bedrock on which everything else was built. When Gideon finally passed at the age of 78, surrounded by children and grandchildren in the house he and Eliza had made together, his last words were for her. "Best day of my life," he whispered, his pale eyes still clear despite his failing body. "Every day with you." Eliza held his hand as he slipped away, and though her heart broke, she was grateful. Grateful for every day, every moment, every memory. They had built something beautiful together, something that would outlast both of them and the children they raised and the example they set. She lived another 5 years after Gideon's death, surrounded by family, still sharp and capable despite her age. And when she finally followed him, passing peacefully in her sleep, those who knew her swore she had a smile on her face. They were buried side by side in the Livingston Cemetery, under a headstone that read simply, "Eliza and Gideon Frost, partners in all things, together, always." And if you visit that grave on a warm summer evening, when the wind whispers through the grass and the mountains turn purple in the fading light, you might almost hear the echo of their story. The story of how a bad husband's betrayal became a blessing, how a mountain man's strength met a woman's courage, and how two people found in each other everything they had been missing. It was a love story born in the Wild West, forged through hardship and lasting beyond death itself. The kind of story that reminds us that sometimes our greatest disasters lead to our greatest blessings, that courage is its own reward, and that true love, when found, is worth more than all the treasures in the world. And somewhere in the mountains that Gideon loved, and the valley where Eliza built her dreams, their story lives on a testament to the power of courage, the value of partnership, and the enduring nature of love freely given and gratefully received. The end came not with drama, but with peace, as it should for two people who had lived fully and loved completely. Their children and grandchildren carried forward their legacy, Daniel's tracking skills, Emma's business acumen, Nathan's compassion, Grace's determination. Each generation benefited from the example Eliza and Gideon had set, and each generation told the story to their own children. The boarding house continued operating for another 50 years under Emma's management and then her daughter's, a landmark in Livingston known for its hospitality and warmth. A photograph hung in the entrance hall Eliza and Gideon on their 20th anniversary, standing together with his arm around her waist and her hand on his chest. Both were smiling, and anyone who looked at that photograph could see the love radiating from it. In time, historians became interested in the story. They found the court records from Eliza's divorce, Sheriff Bullock's reports about the theft, even a few interviews Gideon had given to Grace for her newspaper articles. They pieced together the facts, confirming what the family had always known. This was a true story. Not just legend, but the facts, while interesting, couldn't capture the real truth. They couldn't capture the way Eliza's voice softened when she spoke Gideon's name, or the way his face transformed when she entered a room. They couldn't measure the strength of a partnership built on mutual respect, or quantify the value of love that grew deeper with each passing year. That truth lived in the hearts of those who knew them, and in the story passed down through generations. It lived in the lessons they taught about courage and determination, about standing up for yourself and fighting for what you deserve, about the difference between settling and choosing, between existing and truly living. Eliza and Gideon Frost had taken the worst day of her life and transformed it into the beginning of their best life together. They had turned theft into opportunity, desperation into determination, and lonely isolation into loving partnership. They had built something lasting out of unpromising materials, and in doing so, they had created a legacy that extended far beyond their own lives. On quiet evenings in Livingston, when old-timers gather to share stories, someone always mentions the Frosts. They tell about the mountain man and the laundry woman, about the journey through rough country, about love found in unexpected places. And listeners lean forward, captivated, because it's a story that never gets old. It's a story about justice and redemption, about strength and courage. But most of all, it's a story about love, the kind of love that changes everything, that makes you better than you were, that gives meaning to all the hardships and sweetness to all the joys. The kind of love that starts when a desperate woman knocks on a hermit's door and asks for help, and ends only when death itself parts them, and maybe not even then. The kind of love worth writing about, worth remembering, worth aspiring to. The kind of love that proves, beyond any doubt, that the greatest treasures aren't found in bags of coin, but in the hearts of people brave enough to open themselves to possibility, to risk everything for what's right, and to choose each other every single day. That was the story of Eliza and Gideon Frost, and it was the truest story ever told in the Wild West.